All right, guys, welcome to episode 7 of the Art of Possible podcast. And like we promised you guys in episode 3 about the friend that we were talking about, Kaustav Bagchi, we promised to get him on the show. Get him on the show in the next episode, but this guy was on a flight to London with his new fancy job in impact investing, which we're going to talk about. But we finally got him here. So, Kaust, how do you feel, man?
I think at some point you guys called me a guest, which kind of hurt. But apart from that, it's all good. All good. Yeah.
Let it be known that Kostav did not want to be on this podcast, but has graciously agreed to come and get interviewed by two people that he has grown up with. How long has it been now? 14
Yeah,
years.
it's been about 14 years with Avilaksh and 12 with Ronit. So yeah, it's quite a lot of time.
So this is also an example of the fact that sometimes the people you know and want to count on and feel like will be the easiest when it comes to like doing things like this are absolutely the hardest. They are the most difficult to convince. We had to get on a call with Kostav and then really tell him that his journey is valuable to other people where he thought that it wasn't. And yeah, so guys, like your friends are not always like gonna be the easy ones to get on your
Yeah.
journey. But yeah, we have him now, so hopefully it's gonna be. I feel like it's gonna be a super riveting and fun episode. Kostav doesn't, but we'll convince him otherwise by the end of it.
Okay. So Kostav, let's jump to the question that we had for you right before we hit record, which is, have you ever had a childish dream, and what's the earliest one that you could think
To
of?
be honest, I mean, I've had childish dreams in the sense every kid growing up in India has, right? You see Dravid scoring a century, you're like, हाँ, cricketer बनना है. You see Ronaldo scoring a goal, you're like, footballer बनना है. You hear like Guns N' Roses for the first time, you're like, musician बनना है. But I think those were most of the dreams which I had as a kid, but not anything ki, job perspective, never really had anything till I think I properly got entrenched with what I really like doing, I guess, to a large extent.
You used to play chess as a child, right? Or generally do a lot of math, abacus classes. Your dad put you in abacus classes, right? Right? He didn't.
He didn't, that never happened.
So then, how are you so good at math? Where did that?
I don't know. I mean, I personally don't think I'm that good at it, but I don't know. Oh yeah, there's a story which my mom tells me, right? So I was a really shitty kid, I think, right? Who was quite energetic the entire time, which is quite opposite of I think where I am now anyway. But as a kid, I mean, it'd be hard to get me to fall asleep, right? So my mom would like tie me out. She'd be like, okay, as when I was like 3, 4 years old, and the way was 23 into 14, what's 15 into whatever, 30, what's 78 plus 60, whatever. And I think I should just do all of that because while going to sleep, and then at some point, I think it just got a bit more naturally and probably progressed from there. But I mean, that's just probably why I like doing things like that. But I think it's a far cry from saying I'm good at it or whatever. So that's a separate thing altogether.
Let me just jump in for people who don't know why we're propping up Kostav's math skills. Kos got a 99.8 percentile in the common admission test, which is a test that's taken by like what 200,000 people in India, and he was top 400 in the country, and he was just like, yeah, it's all right, no big deal, yeah. So just to give people a benchmark of like why we think he's good at math, but he doesn't think so. That's cool. I also want to say, like, that's a pretty cool and remarkable way for your mom to tie you out while at the same time also teaching you math and like conditioning you into being like smart at math. What do you think of that?
I honestly, I think the best part about this whole thing is that I didn't even remember any of this till my mom told me this like a few years back, and it came around in some family conversation. So I had zero recollection that there was something like this even happening, honestly. But I mean, it kind of makes sense at this point. It might have been something I probably did and enjoyed back in the day, but I have zero recollection of this ever happening. I'm just taking her for a word on this.
I think this reminds me of something Jim Carrey once said in a video where he talks about what his artistic process is like. which is when he was a kid, going to his room was never a punishment for him because it meant that he could draw, he could write skits, he could do all sorts of things, and that used to tire him out, right? And uh, that's something that his parents encouraged as well. And it also reminds me of how my mom used to give me prompts to write stories about, which is why writing stories has become such a big part of my life now. And it's like you don't realize that at that young age, this impetus that you're getting is going to have ripple effects later in your life. But I think it's really, really powerful when parents do stuff like this.
Did you was math like your favorite subject in school while growing up? Did you always do well? What was it like?
Honestly, no. I mean, I I was never a very good student in, I think, ever. I mean, honestly, I was like proper middle of the class types grades. My parents used to think I was a good student. I don't know why they thought that, but it was always like bang average results, like just maybe somewhere a bit more than the median or whatever. But I didn't even enjoy, I mean, the school math that much, honestly. I think the first time I realized I enjoyed doing maths was literally prepping for CAT, because I was like, okay, this is a good stress buster for me. But that's the first time I literally remember enjoying it. I mean, honestly, before that, while we used to prep for IIT, which Abhilakshana obviously went to the same place, the infamous Bothra classes. Uh, at that point as well, I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. It was less annoying than probably organic chemistry or something like that. But I mean, the first time I remember actually thinking, oh, this is fun, was when I was prepping for CAT. Before that, it wasn't really something which I maybe was the top at, or even like, or even, the perfect example is like all these maths Olympiads you have for kids in schools and stuff. I don't think I ever did anything great in that, because it wasn't really something I enjoyed doing that much, frankly, and was like maybe bit more than average at, honestly.
What drove your decision to pursue engineering? Because we know that your brother's a lawyer, right? So, yeah.
Yeah,
What led to that?
as I think my dad tried a lot, to make me more aware of the world. The first thing he's done for like the past, I think even 60 odd years, is to like read a newspaper the first thing in the morning, right? And that's a habit which I think I've only recently been able to pick up and on a very consistent basis, right? But he had always encouraged me to do that and to read as much as possible. And honestly, as a kid, I don't know, I just felt I always had something better to do. And I mean, in retrospect, it might not have been better, but just know how kids are, right? Like they just do whatever they feel like, and it's just something I never picked up, right? So honestly, I had like no awareness about the world at that age, or even at a few years post that. And engineering as it is for kids in India was the most common or most easy decision to make, and that's just how that happened. It wasn't really a conscious choice that yeah, I want to be a, I don't know, man, an aerospace engineer or like a programmer or whatever. It was just, yeah, this is what makes sense. This is what kids here do. So yeah, I might as well just go ahead and do that. But to my dad's credit, I mean, taking the example of my brother as well, if I had gone up to him and told him, yeah, I want to study economics, or I want to study literature or politics or whatever, he wouldn't have said no. He would have asked me why. Why is that something you want to study? And if if basis any kind of awareness I would have built up, if I would have given him a satisfactory answer, I'm sure nobody in my family would have had any issue in like letting me go on that path.
And I'm assuming that, and this is my story, so I'm assuming that like the way that it worked is you never had an answer to the why with regards to any of those other fields. Because I didn't have an answer at that point. And then my dad's like, all right, if you're not gonna make a decision for yourself, just go do engineering, man. Like at
Yeah,
least you're gonna get a job out of it. Like did that work for you or is it
no,
different?
that is how it worked. And I think structurally the way, I mean, I don't know if it's different now for like kids, but at least when we were young, I don't know. I mean, engineering was the only thing which is extremely wrong. But it just seemed like, yeah, if you're getting good grades, go to engineering, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Abhilaksh and I, when we went to school in 11th and 12th, after 10th is when you typically have to choose between science, commerce, arts, whatever. And when one of the smartest and the most popular kids actually himself voluntarily chose to do arts, there was just a whole, oh my God, what is he doing? He's going for arts. Why isn't he doing science? What is the issue? And that's absolutely ridiculous if you think about it. I mean, why aren't kids encouraged to go ahead and study other things? I mean, you just grow up hearing that is what you're supposed to do. If you're smart, if you're not, if you're, I mean, either ways, you're supposed to just do your best and try to get into engineering. And it's just absolutely, I mean, I'm sure I would have loved commerce as a kid, or even, even economics for that matter. I would have absolutely loved studying it a lot more than I think I enjoyed 11th and 12th studying both our classes, and like, I don't know, organic chemistry, or uh, like pulley physics or whatever. Not to say those aren't interesting. I mean, I'm sure that they're interesting for the right folks, but there's just so much more we never got enough awareness to even explore. And I think that goes for all three of us, to be honest, and most of the kids who grew up around our age.
I agree. Like, I feel like there's something that Abhilaksh mentioned in one of the episodes before when he spent a year in the US and he realized that there are these subjects that you can choose from. Like when you're in school, like if you're interested in like history and if you're interested in math and if you're interested in like business studies, you can pick those
Mm,
subjects and create your own program. But we don't have it. We're like sort of straitjacketed into
yeah,
like science or commerce or something
yeah.
else.
No, no. I mean, what I was saying was, if you come from a family background wherein it's mostly engineers, then it becomes even harder to kind of explore new things. If you have a family background of CAs or like doctors or whatever, it's just much more likely that you end up in that field. I don't know the statistics of if that is more common here compared to other countries, but from just, experience, it just seems like that ends up being the case more often than not, I think.
I mean, just coming back to the example Kostav gave, right, of the kid in our school who opted for humanities. Teachers called his parents to convince them to discourage him to do it. They like so he wanted to do math with economics and like a couple of other subjects like sociology and shit like that, right? So he would come and sit in science class during math, and he would skip sociology class, which would be in the arts section at the same time. And he was like, "Yeah, I can make up for it. I'll study for it later." But it boggles
Yeah.
my mind, right, that
Yeah.
the other nerds in class and like the teachers were like calling him and telling him, "You're making the biggest mistake of your life. You're studying humanity." It's such stupidity. It's so fucking trite, right? Like, if you look at the written works of old physicists and like chemists and stuff like that, right? You'll notice that they quote a lot of the classics. They're very, very well read. They know philosophy, they know psychology, they know sociology, they studied history because intellect knows no bounds, right? Like, it isn't just restricted to the fucking laboratory or the whatever, right? Like, which is what,
Or the spreadsheet.
yeah. So that like is just very sad, honestly.
I think on that point, taking a different view, I also feel like it's because, like Kos was saying a little while earlier, that you're just told growing up that commerce or in science is the best one. It's going to create the best career for you, and then maybe commerce, and then arts. Nobody even knows what's going to happen to you, right? Pretty much like you're in the wild, wild west when it comes to like the Indian system. I think it's a lack of convincing narratives and stories that exist out there of people having taken arts or something that's not part of the norm and done remarkably well. And I think either I don't think it's the case that people haven't done remarkably well, but those stories don't reach us. It's almost like nobody's shown like the art of possible of taking humanities and having like a career that you would want to emulate. But those stories definitely exist, right? Um, and there's probably some kind of a chasm between our understanding versus like of those stories versus them getting
Um,
created.
I'd go, I'd go as far as saying that depending on the kind of upbringing you get, in a lot of cases, those kinds of stories are actively discouraged from ever being mentioned, which is not the case for any of us three, obviously. I mean, but I think in a lot of cases, you just don't even are told literally that these are evil paths to go down. You literally can't go down them, which is so shitty, man. I mean, imagine us as kids having the option to know that this is something which we might enjoy more. I mean, I'm sure like the 4 years we spent in engineering would have been more valuable doing other things. But yeah, I mean that. Yeah, you were saying on.
For context, Abhilaksh, Kaustav, and I were all three of us went to the same college, engineering college in south of India, and we three of us did computer science because computer science was big. I mean, I'm sure it's still big, and it was the most employable stream out of the most of them. And every time for you guys, every time that we'd have an exam, we were obviously pretty shitty students, I guess. Every time we'd have an exam, the night before, we'd stay up till 4 or 5 a.m. for an 8 a.m. exam, trying to finish half of the syllabus. And it was, I feel like it was on those nights that we always came up with the most riveting ideas of how to start up, right? That was the time when we were like, this is a model that would work, and just to distract ourselves from studying. So, like, it's probably putting some context into like why Kos is saying that our engineering college life would have been a lot more fun and maybe intellectually engaging because we'd be able to pick like other subjects and study something that at that point of time we liked, right?
How did you
Yeah.
feel about engineering, and like what were those 4 years like for you from an academic or career perspective?
I think the 4 years of engineering, that was, I think, the first time where you got the sense wherein you had to grind, right? I mean, that's the way I'd put it. I mean, that's how life is a lot of times, right? You might not like a lot of things you're doing, but you just have to grind and get them done anyway. That's honestly how I look at engineering, apart from like a few subjects here and there, which I genuinely did enjoy. But I think I'd say 70 to 80% of it was literally like that. And obviously, the fourth year was trying to figure out the best pathway out of engineering, which I think for the three of us obviously wasn't like a coding cake, but whatever best we could manage, right? I mean, imagine like spending 3 years doing something other than the fourth year, just trying to figure out, what all, where can you get into which isn't what you've done for the last 3 years. So yeah, the way I just put it is that for me it was just literally knowing that you have to grind your way through some things, man. I mean, you can't do much about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
what
that's
were
interesting.
we supposed to do? Drop out
If we
and yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, at that point in time, I think if we dropped out, we'd have. I mean, honestly, I think if again, right, I can speak for myself, right? I mean, that that possibility or the possibility to do something else would have existed if I had enough awareness at that point in time about what I wanted to do, right? Which obviously didn't exist. So in that case, it would have made sense to, I don't know, drop out, pick different subjects, maybe start prepping for something else earlier, whatever, right? But that didn't happen until it was obviously too, I mean, not too late, but like in the last year of engineering. So I think the best stories that come out of folks who've done stuff like that are folks who actually knew what they wanted to do and an idea of what they wanted to do, and then went and did it. It wasn't like how you don't want to do this, but then what do you want to do? And having the answer to that or having an inkling of that is super important, I think.
Correct. And I feel like so an idea of what you wanted to do, I feel like is a common theme amongst all of us. Like we sort of didn't really have a very clear passion driven idea of what we wanted to do during before university. So we went into engineering. Within engineering until the later phase, I feel like cost, like you're saying that we didn't really have a very clear idea of what we wanted to do. Therefore, we stuck out in engineering. It's not like we could drop out and go do something else because we didn't know what that something else was. When was it that in your head an idea of what you wanted to do started forming a little better, and what was that like?
To be honest, that part of things just started getting developed only after I joined B school. I mean, a lot of obviously, like I mentioned, even the last year of engineering was trying to find the best pathway to move forward. Right, there were three options. One is you go for higher education outside in your stream, which for us was computer science. You do a job in India, which would hopefully be related to what you're doing, or even if it's not, I mean, either way, finding the best possible job essentially, or going for an MBA in India. So it was just about at that point in time, it was about maximizing what you had. B school, of course, was the best option for me at that point in time, which is why I went for it. And I think only once I reached there, seeing the different kinds of streams available, insight, which was a lot more interesting. The whole process of it anyway, like, marketing or like even consulting or finance, which obviously worked out a lot better for me. I think that was when I realized this is something I want to definitely, take forward and do something with. But again, in what shape, in what form, where, I think those are questions obviously you answer, or you have an answer to as you progress and see different things.
What was your answer before you sat for CAT? Or rather, why did you sit for CAT and not for other stuff? Like you gave GMAT and you applied to ISB and like you kept it as a backup for these schools in general, but why CAT? Was
Uh,
the logic there?
I think again, for me, my logic at that point in time was to keep options open. Firstly, right, obviously, a master's abroad in computer science made no sense to me, given I didn't really do much about that in my bachelor's itself. So that option wasn't open in my head. So it was obviously either getting a job or going for a B school in India, right? Those were the two options. In terms of getting a job, that was a process, and a lot of times you didn't have control on what you got, what you didn't get. At that time is when I think around the end of third year, the beginning of fourth year was when you guys were prepping for CAT, when our senior Balaji did extremely well and got into like all the top B schools in India. And it seemed like, this is something which obviously is an option if you can do well. At that point in time, obviously we knew it was hard, being just a super difficult exam to crack. But I think the moment I started prepping for it, I realized this is something I enjoy doing. I mean, obviously, that's not to say 10 years down the line I'd get a job which would be adding up numbers, obviously, but at least the process of it became super easy to me, and I felt this is something I enjoy, and just made sense to put in more effort around that area. I had no idea, 5 years down the line I wanted to finance, marketing, consulting, sales, whatever. That wasn't even in my head at that point in time.
Was there parental pressure to figure it out? What
Mm,
specifically might it be, why CAT, etc., etc.?
no. So, my dad said, yeah, of course, go for it, go write CAT. I'm sure you'll do well, whatever. That part of it was there, but it wasn't that, if you don't get into a good B school, then your life is fucked. That bit of pressure has, to be fair to my parents, never been in, right? Obviously, even for engineering for that matter, it wasn't ever that if you don't get into like a top 10, 20, 30, whatever engineering college, we'll disown you or whatever, right? So that has never been the case, and that was never the case even for CAT, or even for whatever jobs I got after it or whatever I'm doing now. So that has honestly never been a point of pressure to a large extent.
So I understand that like you wanted to keep options open and stuff like that. But what was the deeper drive behind wanting to write CAT, wanting to talk CAT, wanting to go to IIM ABC? Because I remember these were dreams you had at the time, right? So what was that about?
It was just doing well, man. I mean, obviously, up until that point in time, I was doing okay in life, whatever. We were all doing fine in that sense, but I never got the feeling that I'd achieved anything, right? And CAT was just there. It's something I like doing, and for the first time, I felt this is something I could actually do well. And I never got that feeling while prepping for engineering or even like giving board exams or whatnot. Right? I never just got that feeling. It just fit like a puzzle. I think, as much of a cliche as that might sound like, but it just worked perfectly in terms of what I liked doing at that point in time, in terms of at least what the exam was like, and you know, uh, just working towards it at that point in time, and that obviously being an attractive option, man. I mean, to be fair, you know, while prepping for engineering as well, getting into the top ITs is everyone's goal, but it wasn't like that much of an intense goal as getting into probably the top B schools was for me, which I realized also is a factor of the fact that I realized that this is something I'm decent at, so might also be like a good option for me in that way. So it's a factor of realizing that this is something you're good at and then wanting to make the most of it, I think, to a large extent. Also, at that point in time, Balaji, the guy we just mentioned, went on an exchange program for a couple of months in Europe, and I thought that was pretty neat, man. I want to do that as well. So that was on the back of my mind, and that didn't derail me in any sense, for sure.
But
I think like you covered it perfectly, right? It's like what you find important, what you are good at, and also a little bit of a fun element with regards to any of these things are probably like the three perfect motivators to go after it. Like you felt you were good at the CAT, it was going to give you like options and it was a good option for you, and then you also had this motivator, like you said, like of wanting to have that life like an exchange program. You prepped for the cat, and then we know what happened. But for those of us who don't know what happened after that,
Oh, after that was when where I think contrary to I think a lot of people's experience, the hardest part, at least in my journey, was everything after cat. Like till cat was super smooth, man. I mean, that felt like that felt like just putting butter on bread, man. I mean, that part of the journey. Everything after that was what was super hard and what actually brought me down to earth to a large extent, right? So obviously, I thought I had a good percentile, whatever, right? Usually from prior experience, anybody with even near that score would at least get like interviews from all the top B schools, and then you'd see what you could get from there, right? And at that point in time, I literally, even after that score, I had nothing. I mean, I just had two or three interviews, obviously, Indore, where I eventually ended up going, Kozhikode, and then Calcutta. That was it, right? And that was super shocking for me. I mean, and obviously, a large part of the shortlisting process is like your grades in 10th, 12th, and engineering, which, if the listeners haven't figured out yet, weren't spectacular in any shape, right? So I just felt like, to a large extent, that uh, I mean, I think all of us felt that, right? I mean, why does what I did as a 15-year-old, why should that come back to punish me at this age, right? Anyway, so for whatever reason, right? None of that was obviously working out, and even the interviews that I had, again at that point in time, obviously my awareness was slightly better, but still nowhere near what I would say would be a decent enough level compared to a lot of other fantastic candidates that were there, and which is why it didn't work out obviously, I mean, Indore was the only convert I got, and in retrospect, everything's worked out fantastic, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But at that point in time, at least, and Indore was the last one to convert as well. So till that point in time, I was like super dejected, and for me, it was like, I might try the cat again, I might get a similar score or even something slightly higher, but I can't change, whatever's happened to me for the past 7, 8 years. So what's the point if I get something now? If I don't get something now, it doesn't make sense to even put effort to it again in the future. So that's where my mind space was, I think, throughout a lot of those months.
to unpack that, you got a 99.8 percentile in
Higher,
the
I
cat,
think.
which
Higher,
which
higher.
for that year,
I think it was
sorry.
higher. I think
Yeah,
it was
it was,
99.89.
8. It was
Yeah,
15.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
it was
How,
8. It
how?
was 8. It was 19.8. That's it. Wasn't higher.
All right, it was 99.8, humble much. It was 99.8, which for that year, for 200,000 people writing the cat, was top 400 in the country, which ideally, based on expectations, would have gotten you at least an interview invite from the top three business schools, which is IIM, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and Calcutta. Um, but you got an interview only from Calcutta, and that was something to do with, again, the fact that your 10th and 12th scores were a certain thing, and also that your undergraduate GPA was less by 0.01 when it came to making the
Yeah,
benchmark.
yeah. I mean, it's just whatever. I mean, yeah. In VIT, I think I got an 8.48 or a 4.9, and 8.5 was the benchmark for like a certain score or whatever. So yeah, I mean, at that point in time, it felt like the end of the world. But in retrospect, I wouldn't change it for anything. So yeah, that was where it was at. And even the Calcutta interview, I mean, I realized where I was, what my level was at that interview. I think that was some of the. I mean, I couldn't help but laugh at myself after that because
Walk us through the process. So, how did you prep for the Cal interview, and what was expectations? What was reality? What happened?
I think I underestimated the whole process by a huge margin, right? And I say that after seeing the way a lot of really successful people have prepped. I had that. I could see that, right? Obviously, we all knew how somebody like Balaji prepped, which was super detail oriented, and obviously the effort everybody puts in is a lot, but the way you kind of approach it, how structured you are with everything, that matters a lot, right? And that's something I've seen you guys also do. I think Abhilaksh is where you know was I think, I don't remember who you got that idea from, or you got that yourself, but basically uh, there was this whole concept of literally every question that you get wrong for the exams, pinning that down into what subject this falls in, what logic this falls in, and trying to figure out exactly what you're good at, what you're bad at, what you need to practice, what you don't have to practice anymore. At that point in time, I could never be so structured about it, right? And the whole interview process, it just felt, I mean, I underestimated a lot, very frankly. And I went about it with obviously prepping for the most obvious things like, about myself, about what I want to do, etc. And by the way, about what I wanted to do at that point in time was just a maybe like a one line answer which had zero depth behind it. And anything else, of course, at that point in time, having a work experience, anything about engineering, and if anybody asked me anything about like coding or like engineering or stuff, that would probably be the end of the interview at that point in time, right? So, I mean, I just at this point in time, when I look back, I feel I just went in with the expectation that literally every star in the universe had to align for me to make something out of it. And it wasn't even like, I mean, I had prepped for like a bit of current affairs here and there and all of that, but to be honest, I didn't approach it at all in a structured way for it to have gone anywhere different, honestly.
What was the one line answer you had prepared?
I had prepared that I want to get into impact investing back then. Honestly, the way things have turned out, and that's not to say I did not want to get into impact investing. It was something which I think I had started just reading about. I think the last year or last couple of years from college, and it did interest me a lot. But honestly, at that point in time, it did not have enough depth behind it for me to justify why I want to spend 2 years in a degree which is different from my current degree studying finance so I can get a job which can maybe eventually lead to that, right? So it had no depth in it. It was just a shallow one-liner answer without any kind of passion or any kind of actual meaning behind it. And that is, I think, a big reason why I couldn't convince any of the best schools at that point in time to kind of take me for that.
So this was in 2017 that you gave the
Yeah,
one-line
yeah.
answer. All right. So what are you up to
I work
now?
at British International Investment. I just joined the firm like a couple of months back. This is UK's developmental finance arm, essentially responsible for catalyzing developmental impact across Africa and Asia.
In simple words, it's impact investing as much as impact investing
Yeah,
can
yeah,
be,
It's
yeah.
the
right?
impact. It's the impactest of impact investing.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
it's fantastic how it's kind of worked out.
Pretty cool, right? You feel like you did well. I mean, like couldn't convince. So I want to do this because I've heard the story, but this is a pretty funny story, and I want to unpack this if you're comfortable with it. So you go into the IIM Cal interview, and then they probably ask you a question, and how does it go from there with this answer? What happens?
The guy asked me, okay, what do you know about impact? Like, what happens? And like, give me an example of like the kind of impact. Like, what do you mean by that anyway? At that point in time, I was like, okay, yeah, you can obviously invest in a bunch of different things, which causes, which brings about both returns as well as actual core on ground tangible difference to the lives of people. And he told me, give me any example of that. I was like, yeah, microfinance. That's like a fantastic way of both helping bringing people out of poverty by giving them credit, and at the same time also depending upon if you do it well, also get you a decent amount of returns as well, right? So it's like, okay, cool. What's the kind of rates of return? Like, what's the kind of interest rates that MFIs charge, right? I didn't have a good answer to that, honestly. I gave some kind of an answer, right, which I think was not very close to right. And the guy told me, you think, this is what the rate of interest is? It's so much more higher than that. Why? How can anybody, earning, getting charged that rates of interest? How can they ever earn a living after that? Or like, it was something around that, basically more like whatever my answer was. And today, obviously, I'd have a much better answer to it 7 years post that. But yeah, that's I mean how it went. I didn't have any kind of second degree answers to anything that they asked. So there was no. I mean, today I could go about maybe a longer time defending it, but at that point in time, I just had no answer. I was like, okay, you're probably right. I mean, you know a lot more than I do anyway. So yeah, that's that, I guess.
What would your answer be today? You said it would be very different.
Today I would say that there's been literally the whole reason why microfinance didn't exist for a long time is because people felt poor people are not credit worthy, they're not trustworthy, uh, they won't pay back your loans. That's what a large section of society thought. But I think with Mohammed Yunus kind of like pioneering the whole microfinance revolution, for example, right, showing that these are folks which are credit worthy if you can lend to them, right? And while obviously the interest rates won't be the same as maybe like a 9-10% interest rate you'd get in an urban part for like a, I don't know, a car loan or a home loan. But the rates that you can charge, which can be, I mean, in my experience personally, I've seen even like 20 and rates between 20 to 25% per annum. Those are a lot less than any kind of credit they can get at this day and age, right? Which if they do get it, they'll get it from like money lenders, which can charge even higher than 50 to 100%, or anywhere around that ballpark. That is if they get credit
and
at all, right?
will break their and they'll break their legs for not
Yeah,
paying back
yeah.
the
So
loan.
I mean, even that, even, and these are folks who literally are not even, you know, in have any form of credit at the moment, right? And you get that for them, and it can cause an insane amount of change for their lives, right? So anyway, just to get back to it, this is like this is stuff I thought I wanted to do back then. I know for sure I do want to do more of it now, but I just didn't have any kind of enough depth of knowledge back then to kind of defend it in a suitable enough manner, I guess.
I feel like, I mean, when you read about something that is probably out of the ordinary, right? Like you could have, before going into that IIM interview, you could have thought of wanting to do a banking job at a big four bank or like join a consulting firm. But you read about this cool, I would even go as far as to say niche topic. And then you're like, you know what? I like this. This is cool. This is what's going to be my answer at an IIM Cal interview. It didn't turn out that way, but it was probably the genesis of like an adult version of a childish dream, right? Which is like, I want to do impact investing, this super niche, not very mainstream topic. You probably, I'm sure you would have stalked a bunch of LinkedIn profiles or researched them and seen that there's probably not enough people doing it even outside of IMCal. But you just dreamt that dream anyway and went ahead with that answer. My question is, what excited you about this topic? Like, what was it that made you feel like this is pretty cool?
I think at least that bit of my answer hasn't changed, to this day as well. I think a large part of it is I've always felt that the work, I do or anyone does, I think it's obviously I can speak for myself, is that there has to be a change, right? That you get on. I mean, there's enough people who today work to get profits or to get value in that sense, right? And that's perfectly fine. I mean, that is also a fantastic way to go about your passion and kind of work towards that. That's fantastic as well. But I've always wanted my work to actually mean something, and like I said earlier, help drive actual tangible change, right? And obviously, I've just joined here, so it's not like I've been doing much yet. But in the long term, that's what I want to kind of at least that's the kind of that's the kind of impression I want to leave behind. That's the kind of actual change I want to leave behind for myself. So that's something which is very personal, but that's the way I see it, and at least that part of it hasn't changed uh, over like 7 years. The core reason why I want to do it hasn't changed. It's not really a life changing movement which has led me to kind of go behind this, but it's just the core meaning that my work has to mean something more than just a bottom line or like a top line for a company. That's just the way I look at it.
So the way I see it, your two big aspirations at the time when you were going into B school were A, you want to be really good at something, among the best at something, and that has to be recognized. And the second thing is you want to do something that positively contributes to the world
Yeah,
in a lot more than just shareholder value.
exactly. Yeah, pretty much.
And how did that inform your decisions at IIM-Indore? From what I remember, you really took to finance courses and you really liked them, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, when I joined B school, I was open, right? I mean, at least initially, I found all of it super interesting because, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I learned there was very quant oriented, very like super to the point, rational. You figure it out and you'll know what to do, right? So in that sense, I was enamored by a lot of the different things, but I was open to it. I mean, it wasn't that finance or impact investment per se was really something which I was fully uh, fully anchored on from day one. I think one of the books which I think captures it perfectly is the kind of the whole concept of having strong opinions but loosely held, right? So in the sense that you might want to have a strong, or your strong opinion might be that yeah, you want to create a positive difference, but loosely held in the sense still flexibility in terms of how that occurs, right? So that literally might be in 1,000 different ways. It can be an impact startup wherein you literally, I don't know, recycle wastewater or recycle or figure out a better way to uh, you know, call maybe reduce climate change. Right? It can be that. It can be literally getting into impact consulting. Folks like Dalberg, they do so well in like consulting governments and private orgs on how to make better tangible change. There's obviously so much going around in impact investment as well these days. So it was I was never anchored on the fact that this is absolutely what I have to do no matter what. But at least in impact, obviously there's a different kind of options or opportunities that were there, right? And throughout my first year, I realized I really really like finance. Uh, Again, a lot of it just came very intuitively to me, and I just really enjoy doing it. So I figured, might as well, focus on uh, like kind of forge a career in what I'm good at and what I like doing. So it just came about from that.
Would you say that your penchant for math bled into your newfound passion for finance?
I think again, like I mentioned, a lot of it is super super logic based, right? I wouldn't say math per se, but I just think a lot of it is very logic and with a rational head, you can just figure it all out very intuitively. So that is, I think, what is on the core of both these two things. And I'm sure, like, I'm sure there's like some kind of a correlation between them, but I don't think it's one specifically leads to the other always.
Okay. What were placements like and your internship and what was that entire process like?
Oh my God, this is this brings back a lot of PTSD, but for like different reasons. I mean, it's different for different folks, right? I mean, I went into a B school with with average grades, average engineering college, no noteworthy internships. Uh, so I mean, again, Abhilaksh knows this, but in B school, before your internship placement is supposed to I mean, like the week or the month you join is supposed to make like a one-page resume of yourself, right? And which eventually comes in use for your internship placement, and then you kind of refine that for your final placements and yada yada yada. So the first time I made my resume, it was literally like a half-page resume. I had nothing to put on it. I mean, there I had folks from like all walks of life, like district toppers, country toppers, like board toppers, uh, some folks who already possibly were in the CFA journey, some folks who were topping all whatever kind of undergraduate degrees they did here and there, and I felt super inadequate at that point in time. I felt, how do I even get a short list, let alone like an actual job in this environment, right? But thankfully, I think things kind of work out. I mean, you are more than that piece of paper that you show to recruiters, and luckily for a lot of us, they kind of see past just that and try to get to know you more before making a decision. So that kind of worked out eventually, but it wasn't an easy process. Like I said, like getting that half page uh, to a one page resume took a lot of time on thesaurus to kind of expand whatever I had. But yeah, I think I got it to about like 80% or 90% of a page, and then hope for the best post that.
You said that you went into B school with like average grades and not too many internships, but you also went into B school like a starry-eyed kid wanting to make a positive impact on the world with this newfound childish dream of impact investing. Did Was there any conversation on campus, or were there any opportunities around that straight off from campus, or was it just like parked for for the intermediate?
Was parked for a while because there were no, I think, even if there were very, very few direct jobs around in and around that whole ecosystem, right? So once I got there, obviously, I knew very quickly that the best way to go about it would be to get figure out firstly exactly what kind of work you wanted to do, and then get a good name in that before kind of switching. So switching over to impact, and that is something which hasn't really. I mean, to answer your question, it was spark for the moment because you had to kind of maximize for what you had at that point in time before thinking for the future, I think.
Abhilash, you had a question,
Yeah,
right?
so how did you manage to land that internship and what was that experience like? And
I
did it get, yeah.
I interned at General Electric in a finance role, and honestly, again, uh, it's a fantastic company. That whole role was fantastic, no doubt about that. But I think it was very corporate finance oriented, and that was also fun in a different way. But I think my inkling from the beginning was more towards a investment kind of a role, right? I think that was when I'd already started prepping for CFA as well. So again, like I mentioned, all of that came at least quite intuitively, and I really enjoyed that whole aspect of it. Obviously, being like a fresher with tangible experience or like the best of grades didn't get me like good enough shortlist for the best firms that came to the company in an investment from an investment side. But General Electric did work out, and that was also a fantastic experience in itself. Probably I realized early that it wasn't something I saw myself doing in the long term, but the whole company and the kind of folks I worked with, they were absolutely fantastic, and it was like a different experience, but something I cherish all the same.
But okay, so you did the internship there, and then placements happened soon after that, and before that you went to Europe.
Yeah.
Is that timeline correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So yeah, so I went on exchange, and placement started just about those small intersection around when I was supposed to come back and when placement started. So around that time, give or take. You mean studying in Europe, right? That's what we were doing.
Yeah, studying is really hard. Like, so hard that every day you wake up with a big headache because you've just been at the books, right, all night.
I think the biggest part about that was obviously I had my brother also in Europe at the moment at that point in time, still do, but so it was obviously great being closer to him. But I think to a large extent, just fully being independent in another continent at the age of 21, 22 really helps you bring about a whole perspective of how to kind of not just survive, but try to do as much as possible with the lens of not being kind of not having to focus on let's say just in the sense being able to focus completely on yourself and what you want to do, let me frame it that way, right? And that is something, that whole independence was something which I think is absolutely fantastic, because I never had anything like that prior to that whole exchange program. So that was, I think, the uh, best learning experience, although not tangible but definitely consequential.
So you got back from exchange. Impact investing is sparked. You got done with your internship at GE, and like all the experiences that you had, you realize that GE is definitely not the place for you. That's not where you see yourself building your career, even though like it offered all a lot of the other kinds of privileges that you didn't want. And you're sitting for placement.
Oh
What's it
God.
PPO
like?
मिला?
And हाँ PPO तो नहीं मिला था. PPO, I mean, yeah, I did get a PPO right before I give the wrong impression. I mean, I'm sure they didn't want me for a full-time role, and to be fair, neither did I want to go back. So that was all good. Uh,
To be very clear, like, were you working for a PPO at all? Like,
I mean,
how would?
I was trying to, because it was a very good job I mean, it was a very good job, all things considered. So had I gotten the PP, I would have 100% taken it, because that would have been the best option at that point in time. The way I like to look at it is you always take the best option basis your knowledge at that point in time, right? So maybe in retrospect, I might not, but at that point in time, 100% I would have taken that job if I got it, right, to be very honest. But I did, which is also fine. I mean, that's just how things work out. And how
But Kaustav, what if like the best option that's available to you at that point of time, according to you, is just one of the best options that you've created, right? Like maybe you aren't seeing all the option sets, right? That's
Yeah, yeah,
available.
yeah. I mean, in the sense that that's why that whole part of to your knowledge also comes in, right? So at that point in time, basis my knowledge at that point in time, that was the best option, which would have potentially been available. Obviously, had I known about different things, I had different paths in mind, maybe not. But again, like I said, to the best of my knowledge at that point in time. So that's how that worked out. Finals again was an absolute shit show, to be honest. Because back then at that point in time, all the top investment banks, etc., by profile did work out to them. And yeah, because again, it's a mix of they're just being better folks, right? I mean, all the top B schools just have so many fantastic people. It's literally for the best companies cherry picking from that batch, right? And to be fair, I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of fantastic folks which got the nod before me, which was also really fine, right? So I'm still thankful because Yes Bank did come along, and I did end up joining them right out of college.
So just to put it in perspective for people that haven't been to B school, right? Like I can speak for ISB, but when you're sitting for placements, you have CA toppers with you. You have people from every IIT you can think of, which is like the world's factory for the smartest talent to ever exist. You have people that have already done an insane amount of internships or actual full-time roles, which are very, very synergistic with the role that they're applying for. So they will have done back end or even front end at an investment bank while sitting for investment banking placements at the school. And then you had Costa, who was a CFA level 2 at the time, right?
Yeah.
Both of which, the CFA level 1 and level 2, are incredibly hard exams to crack. And he had done both of those things while balancing the demands of a full time MBA and scoring top grades in at least all the finance courses, from what I understand, right? Which are directly relevant to your subject.
Yeah, it in the
Uh,
first year, not in the second. Second year was a completely different ballgame, but yeah, I mean that sums it up.
yeah. And you were also a cat topper, which means that just raw intellectual power wise, you can go toe to toe with the best of them, and you have enough proof of that already. But people have even better accolades despite all
Yeah,
of that, and they end up getting those jobs, right?
pretty
So,
much.
what was the role at Yes Bank like, and when you ended up joining them? My question to you is, how far did you feel from the goal that you went to B school with, or the thing that you really wanted to do?
It's funny because my dad, after being like 35 years in SBI, had just one advice for me to not join a bank. Right? That's literally what I ended up doing. So, no, but to be fair, at that point in time, this was I just took it on about as an opportunity in the sense that I was a guy with like no work experience at all apart from like a few 2 3 month internships here and there, right? So for them to take the risk on me, I appreciate it to this day as well, and that's something I'm very thankful for. But yeah, the role essentially was in the loan syndication departments, essentially downselling Yes Bank's loans to other different lenders. So in that sense, it was a bit far from what I wanted in the sense of an actual applying whatever I've learned through CFA, etc. But it was an interesting role in the sense it was a bit out of my comfort zone, and I did learn a lot because of that aspect of it as well.
How far did you feel from what you wanted to do, right? Because I feel like you said that it was a good role and it was
Hmm.
something that you maybe didn't want to end up in, but it did give you a lot. But it wasn't what you wanted, right? So, what did you want and how did you feel about it?
Uh, yeah, so at that point in time, what I again wanted was so the goal for impact was there in the back of my mind, but the more people I spoke to, I realized that to get into impact investing, you need experience of at least one of the two, right? Either impact or investing, right? I mean, the best case scenario is you have both, but obviously you can't get to there without like at least knowing a lot more. So, and for me, knowing the skill set I had with the finance background, the investment side of things was more of a no-brainer to get into that first. So that's what I wanted to get into. I was again open to different kinds of roles in equity, debt, in public private markets, etc. But that was more towards what I was going towards, like more of a finance heavy, evaluation heavy kind of a role. That's what I wanted, and honestly, I never felt too far from it to a large extent because I literally just started my career. Right, it wasn't like I was in a completely different role for 5 years. So a lot of the different companies at that point in time, or a lot of the different IBs, etc., were quite accepting of that fact and were quite willing to kind of go through the motions and see if they kind of like folks in slightly different industries as well.
I think Kaustav has this remarkable ability to be, as he is, supremely humble and caveat all his negative experiences and make them sound as positive, but also be able to say that, oh man, I didn't go through any struggles. Like, everybody was like this supporting me to make the next transition exactly the way I wanted to. So, Kaustav, when you were at Yes Bank, obviously, like the organization wasn't in the best shape. Um, So when you were transitioning from there to like, looking for a different role, what was it like? What was the interview process like? Because I was like, I mean, there must have been like a bunch of places that you interviewed with because you were again
Yeah.
transitioning from a certain role to a different role in finance.
Uh, Again, to be very honest, it was. I'll be very frank. It was actually a lot easier than it was during my B school during placements, right? Because during placements, the same companies would come and they would literally see like 50 odd kids whom they could cherry pick from, right? That wasn't exactly the case while you're applying from another job. I mean, obviously, in the sense, I'm sure all the best jobs still got like 1,000 applications. I'm sure that is the case, but it wasn't really the same in terms of like just directly seeing like five other smart people walk into the room before you, all getting, I don't know, rejected or accepted, whatever, and then you having to go through the next, right? It wasn't exactly like that, but I think at that point in time, I'd also just got done with my CFAs, so there was obviously like a bit of finance related heavy stuff on my resume at that point in time. So it did help in like kind of getting a few shortlists here and there, which obviously eventually ended up working out.
I feel like as somebody who was in this industry, the bar like finance as a overall industry is very big, but it has sub segments. It has like what you were saying, cost like there's banking, there's investing within which you have private equity and venture capital, and then you have investment banking, which is a sub part of banking. And it's like even though it's all finance, the individual sub industries or sectors, so to say, are extremely
Yeah,
selective, right? They have a very high bar because a lot of the world's smartest, most accomplished people are trying to get into maybe investment banking, and then from investment banking, maybe some of the highest performers at the top banks are trying to get into an investing role. So the journey, like to get into investing in itself, is so difficult. And I saw this when I was at my previous job at Blackstone that they hired like just the cream of the crop, like the tens, and it's really tough to get into it because that's just the way that the model operates. So you're still tracing your path from being in finance and banking to like at least getting to investing, so that then from investing you can get into
yeah,
impact
yeah,
investing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you're moving from Yes Bank, and what happens over the next like 2 or 3 years? What kind of transitions do you make, and what's it
So
like?
from Yes Bank, I got into Nomura. That was a role in sell-side research on convertible bonds, right? And that was something I was super excited about at the time, right? Because I had just done L3 and CFA L3, got super excited and like loved, everything around derivatives at that point in time. I thought it'd be a fantastic role. It was a fantastic role, but I was super excited by it. And I thought this was like, the opportunity to like not give away at this point in time. So I eventually did end up taking that, and yeah, I think 3 months into that role was when COVID hit, so everything was like work from home, and that I think was a very challenging part because in a role like that, wherein you don't have folks to, I think, uh, in an office environment to kind of absorb all these new things from, makes it super hard. So I just kind of that was a very hard period for me, and also I think I stepped a lot into my comfort zone of just doing the basics and just doing enough for a long period of time without actually evolving uh, properly. I think so. So that was where I think I lost a bit of time, but eventually, obviously, I think we kind of moved forward in that sense as well.
So, just to add some context that Costa was not providing, he gave 10 interviews at both Nomura and a competing organization, which is one of the most selective in the world, right? Goldman Sachs. And at the end of this, a managing director from Hong Kong personally called Kaustav and requested him to join the company. And Kaustav was like, yeah, nah, I want to do convertible bonds, dog. Like, uh, thanks for the offer, though, right? And then you were at Nomura doing convertible bonds.
Yeah.
But would you say that like you still felt the call to do more of the impact side of things, right? Like, which is um, like, okay, convertible bonds is very different from
Yeah.
let's say uplifting people in rural areas or getting people
Mhm.
jobs. I
Yeah.
don't know how else to put it, but yeah, right.
No,
So
yeah. I think again, like it's more of going the distance rather than the displacement, right? In that sense. So I think Nomura was a lot of trying to kind of scratch that itch I had throughout whatever I learned over the last year or two, right? Which was all super complex and super interesting. So that's just literally what I wanted to take forward at that point in time. And I thought, I mean, honestly, it all adds up because the kind of analytical rigor you go through in that role will help you no matter what you do in the future. So it all adds up, but it wasn't the most direct kind of experience set which will lead you to impact investing. For sure, that part of it is true.
You're doing convertible bonds, and then what's the next transition? Like, did you feel like at any of these times that like your dream of being in impact investing is slowly withering away, and it's just impossible? It's probably not gonna happen. Also, maybe because like I feel like sometimes there are institutional barriers set up for this as well, where you have to be from like the top three IIMs or certain B schools to get in. Again, going back to the fact that what you did before is sort of coming back to haunt you. And in this case, it's not even something that you did negatively. It's something that you are proud of. Like, were some of those things also involved?
Yeah, I think it's hard, man. I mean, I'm sure like anybody who's in finance will know getting into an investing role is hard, especially when it comes to you know at least getting in a super good or even harder in private markets to a large extent, right? So I think making that jump has been, I think part of the hardest. It's been the hardest journey that I've taken. I think very honestly. I mean, just trying to justify why my I would be capable from moving from like a very public markets derivative sell side research role to a more buy side investment role was some of the hardest things that it's probably the hardest journey I've had to take, right? And honestly, it's I can look back and say it worked out, it was easy or whatever, right? But just going through that and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, right? At that point in time, obviously that was the time when the Indian startup ecosystem was seeing an insane kind of shift, right? And a bunch of what I was reading around that part, whether that was Secrets of Sand Hill Road or the Power Law, etc., got me super excited about that whole ecosystem in general. And I again, a lot like impact investing, I decided, yeah, this is what I want to do. Right. This also does serve the investment side of things, and from there, I think the next switch to impact would be a lot more streamlined. So I decided to go after that, and that was super hard. I mean, again, what I wanted to get into was more into the private equity and venture capital side of things, and that's just getting in is super selective and based a lot on your prior experience, which obviously I didn't have. So to kind of get into that full ecosystem took a lot of effort, took a lot interviewing at a lot of different places, speaking to a lot of different people to kind of finally go out and hit the spot right, I think.
but before that, right? Um, was there a fire in you to actually make the leap into this like incredibly difficult field, and like did you have doubts, because VC generally is incredibly hard to break into, right? um, it's a very very small space. They don't hire that many people every year. It's a tight circle, and they do require, in a lot of cases, very very specific degrees from specific places. Matrix, for example, if I'm not wrong, only hires IITs and LSR, right? And SRCC maybe. And similarly, Sequoia Axel, yeah, you need Stanford, you need this, you need that. Like, so at that point, when you were applying to firms, right? Like, how did you make that? How did you start looking for roles, right? Because this is like for us business folks, right? The equivalent of going to Hollywood and asking people to let you direct movies with them. And you don't have a granddaddy, you don't have somebody with their hand on your shoulder. So how did you break through that wall, and like what doubts did you have while doing it, and
I
like how
think
did you make up for the let's say the lack of uh, the specific credentials that the VC world asked for?
uh,
How did you bridge
I think
that?
literally a lot of that was just picking away at it, man. I mean, it took me like almost a year, right? And I think I would have applied to dozens of VC funds, right? Gone through the motions with a few before getting rejected, not even hearing back from most of them. So it took a lot of time, and I think it's a risk on both ends, right? In the sense, obviously me getting into a new kind of field altogether, and also from the firm's perspective to kind of place a bet on somebody who doesn't have any kind of experience in that field, right? So it literally, again, like every star in the universe probably had to align for like somebody from my background to get into it. And again, it was a large part of it was just hacking away and just working towards it. I mean, while I think at the peak, I was literally focusing on this like 3 to 4 hours a day, like on the side, right? So whether that's like literally reading about what's happening, what companies raising funding, what sectors are good, what kind of sectors aren't, who's working out, how do you even like evaluate startups, all of that, right? So it took a lot of time. It took speaking to a lot of people, getting their perspectives as to what works out, what doesn't work out, what should I be doing more, what should I be saying, what should I not be saying, etc., to finally kind of land a gig in that space.
So, what were your first couple of VC interviews like, and how did you handle them? And how did you make the case for yourself as somebody with no experience in startups or VC at that point?
So the first few interviews I got through the shortlist, etc., were for like a few micro funds or like a few family office VC funds, folks who were like putting maybe 10%, like big family office putting like 5-10% of the capital into like startups, etc. And they were a mixed bag. I think a few were like a few were like downright didn't go well at all, right? In the sense, I mean, I remember, obviously at that point in time, you're trying to like you're going through so many different startups. You can't remember all of them, right? So I was interviewing at a fund, and I think they had like a lot of very unique startup names, right? So the guy asked me, okay, do you know like our portfolio, etc.? And I told him, I was honest, right? I told him I have looked up your portfolio. I can tell you exactly what spaces your startups are in, right? I can tell you exactly what they do, but I can't recall their exact names at the moment. I can tell you exactly what the startup does. Like, this guy does like SME lending or like, healthcare, like whatever. I can tell you exactly what they do, but I cannot remember their names at the moment. I know like three or four, but if you ask me like five or seven, I do not know more names than that. I can tell you what they do, what spaces they're in. And the guy just said, dude, I mean, like, that's just ridiculous. You're interviewing here, you don't even know the names and all that. I was like, that's fair. That's fair for you to say it. But I think more important than knowing their names is like knowing what they do and if they're good or not, right? I think that part of it is more important. And so yeah, I mean, that's just an example into like what these interviews kind of went like, right? A lot of them were like that. A lot of them were folks who were a lot more understanding of the fact that, yeah, you might not be from VC, but you're a young guy. I was like, what, maybe 23 or 24 at that point in time. So they were a lot more understanding that, yeah, you're a young guy. I'm sure you'll learn the nuances of it, but they were more about testing me more from a analytical and from an evaluation lens. So some of them I did well, some of them I didn't, but obviously a lot of them didn't work out. What worked out eventually was this fund called Waterbridge, where I eventually worked for 2 years. That is an early stage VC fund based out of Bangalore. And yeah, I interviewed there, had about 4 or 5 rounds, and I think they were super open about the kind of candidates they wanted to hire. Right? I mean, they obviously also told me that it's obviously best to get folks who know the ecosystem, so are on it from a startup background. But we are pretty open, and it's more about like what you can grow to rather than I guess who you are today. So that was the one which eventually ended up working out quite well.
Just for context, how many interviews did you do before cracking Waterbridge? Because I remember it was a fair few, right? Like in hindsight, it feels like a smooth process, but I remember you used to call us and complain about it. So, how many?
Multiple dozens, man, multiple dozens. I don't even know. I mean, for sure, there was more than like at least like 10 to 15 places I interviewed at, maybe like a lot more of places I would have applied at, and a lot more interviews I would have had. But yeah, that's about where I think it was. Yeah, yeah. I I think what just kept me going through was that I genuinely was interested in getting into this field, right? And I thought it doesn't matter, I mean, see, this is a lot like uh, being a fast bowler, right, in a test match, I mean, the guy can hit you for like half a dozen fours, but you just need like one Yorker to go through and get his wicket, right? So that's the way I was approaching it. Or like a striker in football, right? You might miss like 5 or 7 chances, but uh, the one time when it matters, if you score, then that's all that counts. So that's I think how I was looking at it back then.
Okay. At Waterbridge, from what I remember, you, for a fair bit of time, you looked at their investments when it came to sustainability and circular economy. And that was something that, like, we don't need to talk about the specific companies, but is that
No, no,
something
no. I didn't do. I wasn't looking at that segment.
at all?
No, no, no. I was looking at different sectors. Tangentially related to impact, but not core impact.
Okay, but tangentially, which ones?
So I was initially looking at. So initially, what I was looking at wasn't anything impact related at all. Honestly, it was a bit of very vertical oriented SaaS in marketing technology and advertisement technology, and a bit in consumer tech. But I also did the roundup thesis and worked a lot over the entire SME tech space in India, right? Small and medium enterprise tech, which I think in its core is very impact oriented, especially given the state of I think small and medium businesses and how much potential they have to grow in this country. So that was not obviously direct impact, but I think that had a lot has a lot of opportunity to kind of make a lot of impact. I think if that makes sense.
So you just cracked like into investing. How did you feel when you got the job? Like what was it like?
I felt euphoric, man. I mean, I thought this was finally the break, right? Because like I mentioned, I'd gone through multiple dozens of interviews trying to get into here, and finally, I think making the jump. I mean, I was on top of the world at that point in time. Yeah,
Did the park like what year is this now when you got in?
22, 2 years back.
22, and then you got into business school in 27, and that's when you had parked sort of your impact investing dream.
Mm.
And it's 5 years later. Is there some of that trickling back being like, oh man, like this was an absolute like unrealistic childish dream? Maybe it can happen. Maybe I can do something with
Yeah,
it. Is it coming back or what's it like?
yeah. I think that was when the whole thing was the idea. Especially given the VC ecosystem and how much it's growing, and the focus on impact investment in early stage or growth stage VC. I absolutely it was on the back of my mind that this is something which I mean want to absolutely get into, and it's very possible now. But just I think again it was a matter of when and how, not if. I think, but yeah, it was a lot more achievable and a lot more possible uh, once I did get into VC.
No, I was just gonna say that the good folks at Waterbridge obviously gave you your training wheels with regards to evaluating, like just maybe like taught you the tricks of the trade, right? Of like how to evaluate startups and just made you one of the people in the inner circle with the VC ecosystem. Like, what are the things that you learned and like what did that journey feel like? Like obviously you're euphoric to just be there and then you're learning stuff and then you also have this dream at the back of your head, like what does the journey look from there in your head?
It's like learning to completely play a new sport, right? So you have like the absolute foundation, right? Whether that's like hand-eye coordination or like some degree of, let's say, athleticism or whatever, right? But it's like leaving to some extent, like starting a completely new sport or a new format of a sport, right? Obviously, you need a lot of you need to put in work, but at the same time, it's important to kind of get the right kind of backing and the right kind of mentorship to a large extent. That is super critical, especially at the kind of age we are in, I think, to a large extent.
So you're obviously euphoric to be in investing, which is in itself such a difficult place to get into. It's highly celebrated, highly decorated, coveted job. Why still impact? Like you're enjoying your work like a lot. Like why do you still want to go to impact? Like why is it still alive?
In my core, it was still the same, right? Like I said, it's not rocket science, and for me in my head, it's literally just I want my work to mean something, and that's not to say, uh, you know, like I said, like a lot of work you do just being in the VC space, just doing VC investments is hardcore impact. But the back of my mind, I want my full focus to just be on that in the long term. So that's it, just as simple as that. It's not really, it's not super complicated in that sense in my head.
But what was the trigger for you to feel like, okay, it's time to start applying to impact roles? And what was that process like for you? Which is, again, like, so for example, with VC,
Mm.
you went through so many rounds of interviews, applied to so many different companies, right? And now impact is like it's like, I'm guessing the curve gets steeper, right? The requirements
Yeah.
become more
Hmm.
specific, right? So at this point, like, how did that process work for you?
This was a lot more of this took a lot more patience, I think, from two different angles. One is obviously, I think the first year and a half, it was more about year and a half or so. It was more about learning or understanding this aspect of it, right? I mean, yeah, I'm in here, but I need to figure out how things work here before moving on to the next thing, right? So the first year and a half, I think, was a lot more towards getting things done in this fund, getting, whether that's sourcing or like doing new deals or like my portfolio, whatever. So that learning aspect of it was super important. And then obviously, like you said, this is like super niche, right? So there are very few orgs dedicated specifically to that, right? So while there were a few here and there I applied to, but nothing which was like super serious, right? I was only looking specifically for impact roles, like other funds or like other buy side roles weren't really on my radar at all. And BI worked out because I think the role I'm hired for is like a perfect uh, stepping stone from where I was at Waterbridge, right? So from that sense, obviously BI does a lot of work, right? Right from like startup investments to literal large scale infra projects investments as well. So this is the only one which I think would have fit my profile, and it's a lot of serendipity. I think like just the role being open at the right point in time, somehow getting access to the right person in terms of like networking, and then just working out. I think to a large extent.
Were you discouraged from?
Hey, Abhulak, I think we should, I mean, just like taking a sidestep, I feel like we should rename this episode as Art of Being Humble instead of Art of Possible, because that is the more consistent theme that Kaustav has shown us in this episode. What do you think?
I feel like one of two things is true. Either Kostov is the most determined motherfucker on the planet, or he's the luckiest motherfucker on the planet, right? If you listen to him, then it's always serendipity. Yeah, like applied to a couple of companies. They gave me a call back. They were very kind. They gave me a stepping stone. I got through. Yeah, and like I was always kind of good at it. Like worked out, BI, yeah, seems like the perfect stepping stone. And no, that's not how it worked, right? So talk about like how, because I remember in vivid detail, right, that when you were thinking about applying to impact roles, you spoke to a lot of people who discouraged you from doing it, right? Who said that this is a dead field, that companies are leaving India and don't want to be involved in this sort of investment anymore, that the yields are terrible, that it's a that such and such startups have blown up that were propped up because they were bringing India 2.0 up. So that you have no future in this space. You are an idiot to even want to go in that direction. What was that like? And how did you keep going through all of that shit? That's what we want to know, right?
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely spoke to a lot of folks. Yeah, that goes without saying. But and of course, I mean, you hear both sides of the coin when you apply to it, right? And uh, I mean, it's just perspective at the end of the day, right? I mean, a lot of folks do feel that it's hard to get returns in this space, and it's hard to make true impact, and it's hard to make a career or like make a long lasting difference, right? But a lot of people were like also super, gave me a lot of good advice as well as to like how to go through it. So for example, even uh, the whole concept of getting into investment first and then into impact investing also was from one of the folks I spoke to at a DFI, right? And they just told me that it's an easier sell if you're one of the two sides of the coin. And of course a few folks also told me there's no need to get into impact, you're at a good space, you can just like continue to charter, whatever you're doing is anyway like tangentially impact, you can just like kind of go through that. But I think I definitely had to speak to a lot of people, but at the core end, I think if you kind of believe in I think the whole concept of it, and it if you believe in it enough, then that's what you need, right? I mean, you're gonna find people who tell you things on both sides, right? Whether that's like starting up on your own, or joining a different gig, or just going for your B school, or like going to consulting or anything, right? You'll find people who will discourage you, or I don't think discourage is the right word. Who will try to caution you, if this is a better word, because I don't think any of those people mean bad in any way. It's just them telling you their perspective and why you should probably do one thing instead of the other, which is completely fair. But yeah, a lot of it was that. But I think at the core, I felt like it's obviously a field which, I mean, there's still a lot of difference to be made. It's not like everything is sorted anyway, right? So I always felt there's a lot of scope for it, and it's just a matter of the right role coming about, because, like I said, it's a very niche field. So it's not like it's. I mean, when I wanted to get into VC, there were like a lot of VC funds, right? So it was just like applying day in day out and trying to get through. But over here, it was more like coming across the right opening rather than continuously hacking away day in and day out. That's the way I think I look at it to a large extent.
So you're in these very, very demanding, very selective, coveted fields. You're obviously euphoric that you've got in, but was there an element of ever feeling like you're out of your depth, you're like a little out of place, and how did you cope with that?
Every day for the last 2 years, I felt that way, and I still do. I mean, I think when you're in this whole ecosystem, you never know enough, right? It's just there's literally so things happening. It's impossible to keep a track of and be aware of everything, right? So you feel out of your depth the entire time, especially when, as a 25-year-old, you talk to and meet founders who are super experienced in their late 30s, early 40s, who've been in like one sector for the past 10, 15 years, literally know the ins and outs of their sectors. And then you're supposed to tell them that, yeah, this won't work out because XYZ. And then obviously they maybe rightly so feel that you're like a 25-year-old kid with like 2 years of experience. Who the fuck are you to tell me this might work or might not have? Like, I mean, I don't know, dude, it's just my job. But yeah, you feel out of your depth all the time because you're speaking to so many people who, because VC to a large extent, especially generalist VC, is very width rather than depth, right? You know some things about a lot of different fields rather than a lot of depth about one different sector, which is also another way to, I think, operate. But the former was, I think, more around how I kind of spent my time for the last 2 years, excepting for obviously spending a bit more time in a few different fields. But yeah, I think you feel out of your depth like the entire time, and feel out of your depth even uh, even as you go through it, right? You're helping manage a portfolio company as well. These guys have been running this show for like 2, 3, 4 years. What do you tell them which they don't already know? So I think a large part of it is also trying to navigate that and showing that you do have true value to add, and that can be through different ways, right? That can be through building the right connects, connecting with the right folks, showing them, different, like through analytical capabilities, maybe saying that this might not be working out for you. You should probably look at this, or there's different ways to add value. But I think that is a critical cornerstone of what you have to do to kind of survive in this space.
Cool. When I think about your story, Kaustav, right, and when I look at all the different things that have happened in it and all of the quantum leaps that you have made at each step, there are certain things that stand out to me. One is that there is a general sense of consistency, that you wanted something, it was important to you, and you never really lost sight of it, even when at different points of time it felt like it's maybe too late, or maybe it's too unrealistic, or maybe you don't have enough credentials for it, or whatever, right? And you were always playing the game on hard mode. So it almost reminds me of like a Dark Souls boss, right? Which is, you keep fighting, keep getting your ass beat, but every time you learn one or two tricks that help you bring it down to a little bit less health than the previous attempt, and eventually you kill that boss and like you move on to the next one, right? But that sense of not letting the periods of dejection and periods of doubt overcome you, that's something that definitely stands out to me, right? What also stands out to me is just how naturally this comes to you, right? Because it's something I've discussed with your wife as well, but like, you're very, very good at pushing through fear. So and I'm sure part of that is why you landed her, because you didn't let that doubt prevent you from DMing her and asking her to come to that party in Bombay and then getting with her, right? And marrying her today, right? But I think it's just this. There is this very obvious process of have that vision, um, attain information, and then make a lot of attempts and learn by doing, learn by failing, almost, right? And then
Yeah.
at each step, it becomes easier, and then you have it before you know it, right? And that is something that I find truly inspiring, right? But when I think about where you are today, right? And I think about what you told me and Gaur back in college about what your dreams actually are. You said you wanted a government job with a couple of pets and a wife and a PS5 and a good apartment, and that's about it, right? Today you have a government job, just not with the Indian government, with the British government. You have two cats. You have a wife. You have a really nice apartment, and you have my PS5. So it looks like it's all worked out. You made it happen, and I think that
Yeah.
I like to talk about how your vision needs to be like you need to be able to see it. Every little thing in it needs to be very tangible for you, and then you need to start working towards it. You're the perfect example of that. Yeah.
I think Kaustav is, for those of you who haven't watched Dragon Ball, you won't get this, but for those of you who have, Kaustav is a Saiyan. He fights till the edge of death, but once, if he doesn't die, he gets stronger with every fight that he fights, right? That's a Saiyan. Until he evolves into Super Saiyan, which is Kaustav Impact Investing. Loses track along the way, loses his way, like parks his dream of eventually becoming a Super Saiyan, but like just keeps fighting on. And I mean, I always think about this, right? Looking at your journey of, I mean, almost being mocked out of saying impact investing at that IIM Cal interview to like actually becoming an impact investor today. At no point of time, these like more informed, older, more knowledgeable people always told you this is not going to work. Kaustav, this is not going to work. Kaustav, you can't make it work. This industry doesn't work. Don't do it. You sort of bet on in some way your gut feeling and
Yeah.
your internal moral compass of wanting to do this. And I want to say that to you because I feel like you don't think of yourself as probably a supremely confident person, but you did project that silent confidence throughout your career journey, being like, yeah, I don't care, man. This is what I want to do. This is my contribution to the world, and this is the way I'm going to do it. If it doesn't work out, I'll make it work. That's probably my contribution. So, I mean, to add to Laksh's point of you having that perfect life, I feel like what you have added to that perfect life that you envisioned back then is this tremendous sense of purpose and this grander vision. And that's like Super Saiyan Kaustav Bagchi speaking to us today, which is absolutely amazing. Um, so I want to ask one last question. What inspires you today, and how can we take some of that?
I think what inspires me honestly is has not changed over, like, again, I think we've already gone through this a couple of times today, but it's not changed over the last 7-10 years, right? It's literally it's literally in, again, in ways, strongly held but loosely kind of loose opinions, like in terms of just making sure everything you do, or at least what you kind of strive towards, makes some kind of a real difference to people around you. I think that's the only thing which inspires me to, at least from the career perspective, like that's the one long standing thing which I always hold close to me, and want to strive towards. I mean, unless it does that, then I don't think there's. I mean, the rest of it, there's like a million smart people, knocking away at it. But I think this is what really needs to be done to kind of make the whole world an equitable kind of place, and that's what I want to work towards.